Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Broker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo, as usual. And our guest this week is Derek Siddoway. We're going to be talking to him about cross-genre marketing, and he works in a PR firm for his day job, so we're going to get lots of good information from that, too. Hi, Derek. You want to say hi?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
All right, we usually jump right into the interview, but we kind of have some breaking news. Oops. I got the YouTube channel going, that's important. All right, as I was attempting to say, we have some breaking news for those of you who are on Amazon, which is everyone, I assume. And if you've been exclusive with Amazon in the KDP Select program, you may have gotten an email from them talking about Kindle Unlimited, which we've talked about a little bit before on here. But just for anybody coming in new, that's where you're enrolled and people can borrow your ebooks instead of buying them, and you get paid a different amount each month depending on how many total ebooks were borrowed in the program. And recently, it's been about like $1.30, $1.40 per borrow, and it doesn't matter or didn't matter the length of the ebook. It was just could be a short little novella, or scamlet, as some people were doing with some nonfiction stuff, just throwing up 20 pages with a whole bunch of front matter in it to get people. They had to read 10%, and if they did, you got the credit and you made money. And so a lot of people were writing serials and really short stuff and taking their novels out because they didn't feel it was a good deal. If they were selling or letting somebody borrow a $5 novel for and only making $1.30 instead of $3 something, which was what you would usually get. So just as I started writing a serial to take advantage of the program and try to get like 6 borrows for one, with essentially one story, one novel, they come out with their changes today. I guess it was yesterday now. And so now they're changing it so that with the borrows, it depends on the length of the book or how many pages people actually read in the book. And somehow they're going to weight it and figure it out so that it's however total many pages were read in the month. That's everybody will get divided, and however many were yours, that's what you get paid for. So now it could potentially make sense to have your epic fantasy doorstopper books, which is some of us, in the program, and you could, assuming people finish the story, you could potentially, well, I have no idea how much you'll actually make. I'll laugh because it'll still be like $1.30, but now the people doing the little scamlet kind of things, or not even scamlets, but just people putting short fiction in or serials, are not going to make equal money as people that have novels in. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there and see what you guys think about that. I know that Jeff and Joe are not actually in KDP Select, and I only am with a couple books on my pen name, so I'm not hugely affected. But I don't know if you are, Derek, or have any thoughts about the program, the changes either.
I am, yeah. So what I've been doing right now is kind of a 6-month in period. So whenever I have a new release, I'll stick it in for 6 months, try to get some advantages out of that. Then at the end of the 6-month period, that's when I pull it out and distribute to everywhere else. Just thinking about it, I mean, as fantasy authors, it's a good thing for us. One thing I actually did with my most recent book was break it up into 3 parts, and part of the reasoning behind that for me was because the way KDP and Kindle Unlimited works. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see in these first, the first 6 months that it's out, kind of as everything gets shifted and kind of mixed up again, how the dust settles for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how much I make, like on a novel versus something shorter. It's hard for me because, like I said, I only have a couple books in there now, but I am a little tempted with the pen name to move the books back into the program, because I tried going wide with them just to see, because with all my regular stuff, I'm wide. I'm on all the platforms and have been since I got started, and I think that's a good idea. But with the pen name, it's not my bread and butter, and so I'm kind of playing around and just seeing where I can make the most money. And since it's not selling hugely well on the other platforms yet, I may move the novels back in there. We'll see. Do you think you'll put your 3-part book back together as one, or just leave it the way it is?
Right now it's hard to say. I'm going to pull it out and leave it as 3 parts the way it is, and mostly just because that gives me 4 books instead of 2 in the series I have right now. But and I was reading some articles about this right after it happened, and there was a big argument going on where before short stuff was good, now short stuff won't be good. And really what I got out of it was that what I think authors should be focusing on is creating page turners, because basically you're getting paid by the page now. So no matter how long or short your book is, I think you want to get people all the way through it.
Right. Just because you have a 700-page book doesn't mean people will get past page 7.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll be curious to see what the payouts look like the first couple months, because it'll be, I think now going ahead, we're not going to be able to compare with each other because everybody's going to be different based on, you're not going to know how far people got in someone else's books and how many pages were actually read. So I'll just be curious to see if it actually ends up with us all making more money, making the same money, making less money. But I guess we'll see. All right, Joe or Jeff, did you want to chime in on that news that I know is so important to you as non-KDP Select people?
Well, I can say that I was just sort of prepping some stuff that I was considering putting into KDP Select, and so now I don't have any history to compare it to once I finally do move over. But broadly speaking, I'm in favor of any change that rewards people who write more engaging books. So I'm nervous I don't have an engaging enough book to take advantage of this, but if the overall, the whole rising tide raises all boats situation, where if it forces people to write better books, that's probably better for everybody.
I would agree. It definitely would benefit those that actually write for a living, and like someone like Joe who writes really long books. Good for you, Joe. Mine aren't quite that long, but I've gotten some long ones that are out there, as opposed to someone who just writes a 10-page document that says, okay, we're going to put that up there and they're going to get the same amount of money. But I'm just not a big fan of Kindle Select anyways, so I'm just going to post that up there just for me. Yeah, it's here.
Okay, got it this time.
Yeah, so, but yeah, I'm not one for the exclusivity thing there, but who knows? Maybe eventually somewhere down the line sales will drop off and I might consider it, but right now, no. But I can imagine though for other authors, that legitimate authors, it would be a good thing.
Yeah, I will say that with my serial that I totally, completely just finished the rough draft of like this weekend. I'm still planning to go ahead and publish it as a serial. I never do anything you never know when Amazon's going to change their mind. So it's probably a good idea not to cater anything specifically to a certain program. And so I'm still going to publish it as a serial, and I actually feel kind of cool that I've never done a serial before, but this one I really made it so there's a cliffhanger at the end of each section, because I was thinking I got to get people to go on to the next section. So I'm going to go ahead and still do that, and we'll see if it works, and I'll just not get paid 6 times for one story, just the normal amount per novel, which is okay, I guess. But yeah, we'll chat about it again in a couple months, and I can let you guys know what's going on. But I guess that's enough breaking news. It was exciting to cover something new. Why don't we get into our interview with Derek now? And Derek, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing and self-publishing?
All right. Well, as you guys have already announced me, my name's Derek Siddoway. I've been in self-publishing for just going on 2 years now, but I've been in kind of a writing and creative background. I mean, the majority of my life I've always been writing something in one form or another, whether it was in school or out of school, or then getting into books, serials, novellas, different things like that. I'm heavily influenced by the classic Tolkien. Game of Thrones actually came on later in life, but it was still before this HBO series came out, so I was Game of Thrones cool before it was cool. I like to tell everybody. But I also kind of have a Western influence and stuff, just like you, Lindsay, being out here in the western part of the United States. I enjoy Western movies, a few Western books, and so those influences have kind of came to fruition in my works as well. Fan of Star Wars, things like that, and so really my writing is kind of a mashup of 3 different genres all coming together: sci-fi, epic fantasy, and then Western as well.
All right, yeah. When I moved down to, all right, that's somebody else's YouTube. I can hear an echo on somebody's. I think it might be you, Derek. There we go. See here. I know. You guys hear it too, right? All right, the guys are nodding.
Are we
All right.
better
When
now?
yeah, when you're not talking, just mute your microphone for now if it's an
Okay.
issue.
All right, there we go. Not that I don't love the sound of my voice, but it's a little weird hearing it coming back at you. Yeah, I was gonna say since I moved down to Arizona, I've definitely been more inspired, and I think when I'm seeing these old westerns, like, oh yeah, that was shot in Sedona. Now I've been there. But did you ever consider traditional publishing, or did you just kind of always know that you were gonna go with self-publishing?
So up until I finished kind of the third workover of my first novel, I'd always planned on going the traditional publishing route. So I did the whole thing where, I wrote my query letters and tracked down as many agents as I could find and sent it out and sent it out. And for me at least, kind of weighing the pros and cons of that, I looked at it and I thought, all this time that I'm spending trying to get an agent is time that I can't be writing and time that I can't be becoming a better writer and writing better books. And I thought my first novel, Out of Exile, it was still good enough to be published. And so I thought I want to go the self-publishing route with this, one, because of the freedom and the flexibility, and also my background in marketing and public relations. I'm a little bit of a handyman, do-it-yourself, jack of all trades kind of guy. And then on the other hand too, I wanted to keep writing more books, and I wanted to become a better writer with the time I had, rather than shopping that one novel around for 10 years and hoping for that big break to come one day.
Yeah, perfectly understandable. And I think for people who aren't afraid of digging in and learning the ins and out of book marketing, that it's can definitely be a good way to go. Now I got a dog digging at her bed, so I better jump on to the next question. We're just curious, since we're going to ask you some questions about the PR stuff, could you tell us a little about your day job too?
Yeah, definitely. So I work at a small public relations agency, and we work with a variety of clients, government. We work with a mall that's located here. We're working right now on a children's book. We pretty much do a little bit of everything. So it's a as far as honing marketing and public relations skills, it's a different challenge every day, and it helps you stay sharp and on top of your game because you never get into a routine really.
All right, cool. I think Jeff had a question about the PR stuff too, and then we're going to jump into some marketing questions, and we'll ask you about your books a little more too.
It's a good thing you can't see my hands on the desk. I'm sitting there with my arms folded, like, Jeff's going to ask a question. I'm like, yeah, what? Oh, crap, my mic is muted. Okay. I do have a question for you. If by chance, you say you're working with a children's author, I know you can't talk too much about it, but I was curious from the point of view, like, if I myself as an author were to contact a PR firm, what could I expect to be, why would I do it? What sort of advantages could a PR firm offer me as an author?
So I think in the case we're working with the publisher actually, but we've been brought on just for this one book. So it might be a little bit different when you're reaching out to an agency specifically to work with you, on a specific book launch or just in general. I think the most important thing is to really break down and say, okay, how much do I want to spend on this a month? And this is the limit, because basically billable hours, if you don't set a limit on that, you can tell people to do as much as you want for them, but the price keeps going up and up basically. And so it's a fine line between determining how much you need and what you need. And kind of going along with that, it's also taking a look and saying, okay, it's kind of the same as hiring an assistant. What some stuff you think, what could I do myself, and what could I do myself, but what could I be doing with my time and better spending my time maybe. And then there's also, okay, what can they offer me that I can't do for myself, and kind of how much is that going to cost me, and where's the balance between those two things?
Are you referring to like contacting certain, like, for instance, web search engines, or submitting them like ads and whatnot to Facebook and Amazon, that sort of thing? I mean, I was wondering if you can give me an example, like when you say like how much I want to spend, well, that almost suggests like those pay-per-click type of things. Or is that what you're talking about?
So traditional PR and traditional marketing, it's kind of a blend. The industry is just getting into the digital side of things. Right now it's still kind of separate, where you have your PR firms and your marketing firms, and then you have all the digital marketers, the digital SEO companies, and different things like that. So with traditional PR, what you're looking at is basically getting the word out to everyone about your book, not so much advertising, even though, like I said, it's all kind of blending together now. And if we had this conversation 5, 10 years down the line, I think you'll talk to an agency and they'll do all of those things. But kind of what I'm referring to and what I usually do in my day-to-day stuff is building campaigns basically to get publicity, whether that's through digital media such as bloggers and online forums, online news websites, and then also the traditional stuff that PR is more associated with, which includes newspapers, TV outlets, and different things like that.
So you're just trying to get the word about this author and his book out there and get people talking about it, essentially.
Basically, yeah. And when people ask me, so what exactly do you do for your job? I tell them, well, one of two answers. Either one, I make people look good in front of the public, or two, we just get the word out so everyone knows about you, or at least the niche that you're looking for in your audience, they know about you.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Let's see. Well, Lindsay, should I just go ahead and switch over to the marketing here?
Yeah, I think you're first up on the question, so go for it.
Let me go ahead and scroll my list down here. All right. So, marketing cross-genre fiction. I notice you've classified yourself as you write in the medieval Western. I mean, how would you answer if someone asked you, like, what exactly is medieval Western?
Well, basically the short version and kind of the unofficial version, I say, is something like John Wayne meets Game of Thrones, basically, is the shortest way to describe it. So you're still in a medieval setting, a medieval time period in kind of an American landscape setting, and then also kind of throw in just the stuff you get in Westerns, a lot of action, a lot of gritty characters, a lot of, there's not a lot of law and order going on, different things like that.
I mean, because I think of medieval Western, I'm thinking, I see knights in armor with a Colt 6-shooter strapped to their hip. I mean, it's something similar to that, or?
So technology-wise, things are in a medieval time period, so no gunpowder, anything like that. It's more of just the setting and then also kind of the things you throw in. A good way to describe it, if you've ever read any of the books by S.M. Stirling in the Emberverse series, the first one's called Dies the Fire, and basically it's a post-apocalyptic book, but the way it works is, for whatever reasons, not only does technology not work anymore, but gunpowder doesn't work anymore. And so it's set in the Northwest, and what you have are all these different kingdoms pop up, basically with a Western influence thrown in. And then also you have Native American tribes kind of going back to the way they were 200 years ago. And was one of my early inspirations, is just the way that you have kind of an Americanized Western setting, Western themes going on, but yet technology is limited to what you would find in a medieval period.
It's almost like the technology has regressed back like 100 or 200 years, and people are forced to live that way again, essentially.
Right. So the only difference basically between my stuff and that is I'm not post-apocalyptic. I'm just saying, what if this world existed the way it does without some gigantic catastrophe happening.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. I mean, okay, so for instance, you come across a group of diehard fantasy buffs, and you're trying to get them to, like, okay, well, you're trying to sell your genre on them. How would you go about doing it? Would they essentially just describing the John Wayne meets Game of Thrones sort of thing?
Right, so I think the important thing is to realize that, it's not neglecting fantasy stuff either. I mean, you still have kind of the traditional hero's journey going on. I have a bunch of multiple point of views going on, so you get different characters, different ages, male and female, all with their own struggles. But as far as kind of the storyline and the plot, it's still very much fantasy in that, there's a struggle against an enemy or a group of enemies. There's a little bit of magic thrown in, and I kind of did it in a way that it's not high fantasy magic. It's just kind of something that's happening behind the scenes, and it kind of grows and progresses with the series. Then you also have fantasy things like fantastic creatures, I guess is a good way to put it, and different things like that going on.
Very cool. I'm definitely going to check that out because my curiosity has been piqued. So, next question I have for you is: do you target your marketing to a specific demographic? I mean, do you feel young adults would enjoy your books just as much as, say, senior citizens would, or vice versa?
So I'm kind of in the new adult age group. Not a lot of romance, which is what's traditionally associated with new adult, but kind of I would say my ideal reader, basically 16 plus. There are some maybe more adult themes in there, and that's just as far as, battle going on, and different things like that. Language is probably a 16 plus area, nothing hardcore, but definitely not something you probably want your 10-year-old reading quite yet. And so kind of the best way that I use to explain it is, if you've read books like The Chronicles of Prydain, or the best book that I kind of describe when people go, okay, like you just said, but what really is it? It's really similar to the setting that Joe Abercrombie has in Red Country, where it's not grimdark, but just the setting. It's kind of a wild frontier. There's a lot going on, and yet, like I said before, technology and warfare and everything there at a medieval level.
Yeah, usually when people ask me about my books, and I always say like the best way I can classify them is to use the movie rating system. I would say a PG-13, and from there, I mean, I've got a couple that are more towards PG, but most of them are PG-13 because there's some action, there's a couple of little fights, there's a little bit of swearing, no f-bombs or anything. But so yeah, it sounds like you'd be like right smack in the same thing, PG-13 and up sort of thing.
Right, exactly.
Perfect. Alrighty, that's it for my questions on this particular topic. Let me hand you over to Joe, and he can start asking away.
Yep. All right. So on the subject of cross-genre and multi-genre stuff like yours, I've noticed over the as I observe entertainment, there's some genres that complement each other very well. The samurai stories and westerns tend to mesh pretty well. They often are telling the same stories through different methods. Westerns and fantasy clearly mesh pretty well with your stuff, or from sort of coming from a different angle. The Dark Tower series has elements of gunslingers as well as a fantastic setting. Do you think there are any genre mixes that are pure poison and should be avoided, or do you think that any story can be written and marketed well if you handle it right?
I'm, just from what I've read and some of the other books that I've heard about that are exploring the cross-genre stuff, I think that it's kind of a new frontier itself. But I would say the only limitations are what the author can do and what they can pull off. I found, writing these books, my goal with each one obviously is to get better. And as I progress each book, I try to blend things a little more together and pull more themes from each one. So I think really the only limitations are what authors can do themselves. And that's something where, even going from my first book to my second book, and in the second, in Return to Shadow, the second book, I really tried to bring more of those Western themes out, where in the first book it was kind of heavily epic fantasy. And so I wanted to try to blend things more, and I'm hoping that I can kind of, that will continue to grow as I progress as an author. And I would say the same is true for anybody. It's just, what it comes down to is if you can tell a good story without, having two genres conflict one another and preventing that, I think.
I would agree. I think that anything can be fascinating and engaging if it's written well enough. So I'm kind of curious. Again, medieval western would be an example. Just it gets your brain going, because whenever a genre combination or anything like that is introduced to me, I sort of think like, how would I do it? And sometimes I don't have an answer, which means I kind of have to read that book to find out how you do that. But on that subject, broadly speaking, if you were talking to someone who was just planning to write their first book, they'd never written a book before, and the idea they had was multi-genre or cross-genre, would you say that, yeah, go ahead, write that book, or would you suggest, do you feel there's a higher degree of difficulty, and maybe there should be a couple of introductory steps to literature before you take the blaze new territory into a multi-genre thing?
Well, I think the same way that everyone, and I was taught this, and I'm a firm believer in it, that you need to graduate from short stories. And once you can pull off a good short story, that's when you should tackle a novel, or at least if you want to write a novel before you firmly grasp everything, that's one of those novels that you throw in your desk and no one else reads. And I think the same thing's true when you're working with genre. You have to have a firm understanding of the conventions and what readers expect, because just because you mash two things together, obviously there's give and take there, but there are still reader expectations, and it's kind of like where do the two circles meet, like a Venn diagram? What's in the middle? What do you have to have no matter what you're writing out of those two genres for it to make sense? In my situation, it's kind of, the Western setting, it's usually focused on a single character, and it's focused in on a town or a small area. So I kind of tried to take that same approach, saying, okay, but let's look at 5 different characters in a few different areas, and then expand the story as we go out, much like you would with an epic fantasy. So I think it's perfectly fine to experiment and try things out when you're still you're still going through the growing pains as an author. But I think it's important to study convention and to understand why you're breaking the rules if you are, and to understand what rules can't be broken in some cases.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because, I mean, in order to write a genre well, you have to understand the genre, and therefore, if you're going to be creating a cross-genre piece, you have to understand at least 2 genres. So you should be ready. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's about all I have on the cross-genre stuff. So now I'm going to pass you off to Lindsay to see what she's got to say about it.
All right, Derek. My question for you is, well, I would say that when I came up kind of trying to write short stories to submit to magazines, the hopes of like making sales and finding an agent one day, that the cross-genre stuff seemed really popular, because like anything you could show the editors that they hadn't seen before, they got excited about. They were like, God, don't send any more orcs, no more dragons, show us something new. But I've found, as now publishing as a self-published author, that people tend to want familiar stuff, and it's a lot easier to sell dragons and orcs and the Tolkien-esque kind of stuff. So have you, what kind of challenges have you come up against in marketing your stuff?
Well, I think the easiest way to kind of talk about this is in terms of Amazon categories, and I have my books out in other places, but I think that's the best example of kind to tiptoe the line between 2 genres. So where I'm at in Amazon, I'm in what's called the Western sci-fi category. Then I'm also in Arthurian fantasy, because I have some Arthurian themes in the book, and then also in historical fantasy, because, like I said, there's a magic system in place, but it's kind of behind the scenes. No one really understands it. It's not really prominent. So it's not really like what you would consider, traditional high fantasy, where everyone knows about magic or knows how to wield magic or knows that it exists. So I think what you have to do is basically go into, find historical fantasy lovers, find people who are into Weird West and are willing to experiment, find people that are into Arthurian fantasy, and say, look, my book has these things in it, but it also has something new that you might like. So it's kind of a mix of saying, yeah, I know you love this thing, so come try this out, but also you have to say, and you might have to give me a chance because there's some other things in there that you might not be used to. I think the most important thing is kind of drawing on what resonates with the reader already and what they already love. And if you can bring them in, kind of get them in the door, get them to buy the book and try it out, hopefully from then you can kind of spread things out and introduce some new stuff that way.
All right, cool. And I didn't actually know there was a Western sci-fi category, so I'm going to have to go look for that, because I might have some stuff that I can move in on your category there. But no, it's great too if you can be in one of those smaller categories. Like I know the Arthurian one is pretty small and not too competitive, compared to epic fantasy, of course. So what is your strategy on cover art? Because I'm kind of looking at your covers now, and I would say those are kind of epic fantasy to me. Look epic fantasy to me. Is that what you were going for, or is it? It seems like it'd be hard to convey all the elements you're talking about on a cover.
Covers are a little bit trickier, and basically with the cover I had to decide, okay, out of the genres I'm crossing with, who do I want to try to draw in? Who do I want to draw in the most? And who am I going to have to say, hey, look, you're just going to have to give me a shot with this? And so with the cover, I kind of went with the Out of Exile cover, for instance. I have kind of more of a western-y background going on there, kind of the leathery, papery look. But then I had at the bottom you got the traditional knights charging, and then on the other side you've got some horse archers, which were symbolic of a race that I have in my book that are kind of a cross between Native Americans and Mongolians. And so going with the cover, I think you've kind of got to decide, okay, what's my A genre that I want to represent with this cover, and what are the things that I want to throw in as flavoring to represent some of the other genres that I'm in. It's a little bit easier with the blurb where you can kind of explain things to people. So it's a case of let's draw them in with the best cover possible. Maybe it's not, and if you look at the other covers in Western sci-fi, I definitely stand out. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing yet, I'm still trying to decide. But if you can draw them in with the cover, I think, and then you have a little more leeway with the blurb to kind of tell people what's going on here and let them figure things out.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for just kind of doing a cover that looks a lot like other stuff that's selling well. You know, as much as we all want to be original, and I've talked about this on here before, I've definitely done better when I've kind of just said, hey, make this look like epic fantasy, make it look cool, as opposed to like, these 3 things happen in the story, so I want all those elements on there and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's a good strategy. My other kind of question for you here is that when you're calling yourself medieval Western, do you think it's like, are you trying to brand yourself as kind of something unique, or do you think that people, when they hear that, does it say enough? Do they understand what they're going to get, or I don't know. Have you had to explain it, or do you think it says it all?
I think you have to do a lot of explaining. Kind of the same conversation that we've had talking about medieval Westerns is one that I have whenever I'm explaining it to, friends, family, people I know, people online. Everyone wants to know what a medieval Western is. So I think you start off saying, well, it's kind of a combination of epic fantasy, and they go, okay, I like epic fantasy, or I understand what that is. And then you say, and then there's also some Western stuff in there, and they go, like what Western stuff? And you have to explain either, that means A, there's no gunpowder, or, just the different ways that works. Another way that I've heard it put, there's another author, I can't think of his name right now actually, what he calls what he writes frontier fantasy, and it's kind of the flip side where it's in kind of a North American setting, but it's very much medieval as far as the characters, except they do have gunpowder and the technology level is a little bit higher. So I think it's going in and saying it's a medieval Western, and by medieval Western I mean it's this, 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 and this, which you already know about.
All right. Last question for me in this category is you've got a blog that I think it's called Everyday Author, and the tagline is for authors who can't quit their day jobs yet. I was just curious if that's something you're doing kind of for marketing your own books, or just in hopes of sharing what you've learned, or what are your thoughts on, I guess, what are your thoughts on blogging as a form of marketing?
So the Everyday Author blog, it's more of a way to, well, when I started my original website, which is my author website, I found myself alternating blog posts between, writing about stuff that my readers would be interested in, and then I think, like a lot of authors do, writing about writing stuff, because that's what we do and we want to tell people about it. But I would say the majority of our readers probably don't care about that stuff, at least the ones that aren't authors. And so it was kind of a way to separate those two things. And then also another inspiration of it was just looking at the different resources out there in the self-publishing world. There's a ton of great stuff between podcasts and other blogs and things like that. But I found at least the majority of the stuff that I was following was from the perspective of authors and indie publishers who'd already kind of at least made it to the mid-list level and were reflecting back on their experiences. And so what the Everyday Author is it's a chance for, like I say, authors who can't quit their day jobs yet, people just starting out and people balancing another professional job with their writing. And it's a way that we can kind of share advice with one another. We do a lot of guest posts. basically to say, you're not in this alone, and we're all going through this, and here's some tips and tricks that we've picked up that we'd like to share with everyone else.
All right, sounds good. And I will say, as somebody who's been blogging about self-publishing for like 4.5 years now, I put my affiliate links to my books over there on the side and the pictures and stuff. And even though I mostly blog about that on my site, and mix in a new release thing here and there, I do actually sell a lot of books through the affiliate links. So we'll have to talk about blogging on some other show, but I've found it to be worth it, even though I'm not necessarily talking to the target audience or the target readers. So you never know, because it's easier to get links and things to kind of informative posts. So I hope you keep it up, and definitely sounds like it's something you're interested in, so that's good. Okay, I'm going to pass you to Jeff, and we're going to ask you some kind of questions based on what you've learned from your day job, because you're kind of unique in that you have two, kind of points of view to draw upon here and give us some advice on the marketing stuff. So take it away, Jeff.
Alrighty. So, based on your experience, working in the PR, I don't know if you can answer this, but I hope you can. What would you say is the most effective, least known marketing strategy that not enough people take advantage of, in your opinion?
That's kind of a tough one. I have an answer that I thought of right away. I'm not sure if it's the least known. Maybe it's the least appreciated, I guess, by everyone. But I think at the kind of grassroots level of PR, a lot of the stuff we do is stuff that authors can do on their own without any, serious background in public relations or marketing. And basically all that is reaching out to bloggers, saying, hey, and other authors that have blogs as well, and starting kind of at the ground level, building a foundation, saying, hey, I'll read your book and review it if you read my book and review it. Hey, I noticed you like reading, you left a review for this book. My book's similar to that. I think you might enjoy it. So I think the kind of the most basic and the most boring strategy almost is basically at that level where you're talking about going on and finding people that will put the word out about your stuff for you. And as you guys talk about all the time, it's not an effective thing to go on Twitter and say, buy my book, buy my book. So it's basically, and it doesn't sound pretty, but it's getting other people to say, hey, this guy, his book's decent, you should check it out. There's more credibility that way when it comes from someone else other than me who, is making $1.29 or whatever off of my book if you check it out.
Makes sense. A book's cover or a book's blurb? Which would you say is most important in attracting a new reader?
I'm going to have to go with cover, and the only reason because I'm thinking of in order of what readers see, and usually it's the cover first. If you can't get them to click on it because of the cover, they're not going to read the blurb. So I think the most important thing, and something that I've also continually tried to improve, is my cover art on each book. Something that's more engaging, draws people in, because without that first click, people are just going to scroll by, and it doesn't matter how good your blurb is or how good your book is if you can't get them on your page.
Yeah, I've noticed I find myself doing that somewhere. I read somewhere that each person, when they're reviewing an ebook, whether on whatever device they're looking at, on a computer, iPad, tablet, whatever, that they consider each book for about 4 seconds, I think it was, 4 or 5, because they're just kind of skimming through. Okay, I'm looking for a fantasy book today, so I'm skimming through the covers. Oh, that one looks interesting, and the eyes shift to the right, and they read the description, and if it likes it, there's been times I've seen the book or the cover looks great. I would go over to the blurb, and the blurb, don't get me wrong, I know the blurb's important too, because if I read a blurb and the grammar's off, there's typos in there, I'm like, man, this would drive me nuts. I'm sorry. Move on to the next one. And literally, you've only wasted like 4 or 5 seconds for each one. I know I probably shouldn't, judge a book by its cover, but unfortunately, I actually do, because when I'm skimming through, I was like, yeah, that one looks good. That one looks professionally done. That one, that might give it a chance. Look at the cover or look at the description. What the heck? It's only a couple bucks. I'll give it a try. That's how I usually find the books, to tell you the truth.
And I think really it's kind of a 1-2 punch, like you said. You draw people in, kind of you get them in your range with the cover, but then if you can't hit them hard and sell them with the blurb, it doesn't matter how good your cover is, like you said, people are going to skim it over. And also going back to what Lindsay said earlier, people are kind of drawn into things that they're already familiar with and that they know they like. So I think if you have a cover that brings people in by saying, oh, this looks like this best-selling author and this best-selling author, and this looks like the top books in this genre, people are more willing to click on that. And the blurb coming after that, it might not be just like all the other bestsellers, but if it's engaging and it's free of grammar errors and typos, I think that you're a lot better off.
Yeah, and I was also going to mention too, like one of the previous things you said about getting, like, making some friends with bloggers, other authors, that sort of thing. Kind of ties in a little bit with what I've done, because what I've done, and I've noticed a couple other author friends of mine have reciprocated, is once you get to the end of your book, I actually I have a little author's note back there saying, hey, thanks for reading the book, feel free to sign up for the newsletter, blah blah blah. If you like this book, I encourage you to check out, and then I give them like maybe 3 or 4 other books there saying I've read them all, they're all great, it's worth your time essentially. And I've had those other authors contact me and say, like, I've had quite a few people that said they've read yours, they're giving mine a shot, they really enjoyed it, and then they reciprocate. In the back of theirs they said, if you like this, try that one there, and it works fairly well.
And that's one thing I've tried to do to kind of get more readers in the Western sci-fi category. In Amazon, for instance, I've swapped guest posts with another author, and then we've also scheduled KDP free days for the same day. So I'll send out an email to my mailing list, mention it on social media. Hey, check out this guest post that so-and-so wrote about their book. If you're interested, you can also grab their book for free today. And by the way, you can grab mine for free as well today. So I think it's kind of a balance of building off of each other's fans, and then also reaching out to authors that are maybe a little bit farther up on the ladder as far as being established, and then at the same time authors that are a little bit lower down on the ladder. It's always nice to help people out, and whether it's in the web or in real life, it's always nice to help other people along and help them achieve their dreams as well.
Absolutely, it works great. All right, that's my question. Let me hand you over to Joe.
All right. When on the subject of PR, when people think of PR and they think of authors, there's a couple of things, like they'll think of the big name authors and what they do, and there's a few things you'll think about, like personal appearances or book tours and stuff. This is stuff that big name authors will do and indies tend not to do, obviously because it's a huge expense and time sink to do that sort of thing. But do you think, assuming you have the opportunity to do, say, some local appearances, like the sort of stuff a big author does locally as your time allows and as your budget allows, you think it's worth doing, or should you focus more on the digital aspect that's the more bang for its buck?
I think that it's also important to at least kind of test the water and see how things are outside of the digital realm. I know in self-publishing, a lot of the times we get caught up in, okay, I've got to check my SEO, my website's got to be like this, I've got to get my email signups up. But I think it's important to kind of take a look around your community, the city you live in, even the state you live in, and kind of see what groups are out there and what opportunities are available. Outside of the digital stuff that we've talked about as far as pitching reviewers and getting in touch with other bloggers and authors, I think one of the best things you can do is just take advantage of the local media in your area. The small papers that are always looking for a story, the indie bookstores that would love to have an author come in and talk about their book. There's a lot of great opportunities, and as far as media coverage and public relations go, that stuff really builds on one another. So you start off at the local level, and then maybe you move up to the regional level, and then you get to the point where you've got enough coverage where you can go to some of the bigger outlets and bigger media companies, whether that's print, online, TV, and say, hey, I've done an interview here, 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 and here, and here, and this is what I talked about, and they say, okay, this person must have something interesting to say because he's talked to a dozen different papers and news stations. And really, at that point, it becomes more of a numbers game of how much media have you got, really, then no one really cares how small it was. It's kind of a number of quantity, but it's something that everyone can do is just reach out at the local level, like I said before, libraries, indie bookstores, small town papers, news stations, whatever you can find and say, hey, I grew up here, or hey, I've been living here, or hey, I just moved here and I just wrote this book. And I think also we in the online indie community that we kind of get in our heads that everyone out there writes a book. And really, in the real world, when you get out there, people go, "Oh, you wrote a book?" So there's a lot less people writing books in the big scheme of things, I think, than we all realize. And it's always nice to kind of step away when you can from that and realize that, writing a book is a big accomplishment, whether you're selling 100 copies a day or 1 copy a month.
Yeah, it's been my observation, to my great surprise, that there are huge swaths of the public who feel like if you are an author, you are some degree of celebrity just by virtue of being an author. And it's nice to know also that, like, with public appearances and media coverage and stuff, it's like anything else when you're doing indie writing. You can bootstrap yourself up to having the track record that the other people have. You start small and build. So the same techniques that work with the small stuff work with the stuff that traditional people are doing too.
Right, and one thing I like to say is that in the public's eyes, perception is reality. So, and as authors, we kind of maybe not take advantage of it, but I think we're all aware that when you talk to someone who doesn't know a lot about self-publishing or about writing, and you say, "Yeah, I wrote a book," a lot of people, the first thing they assume is, "Oh, you must be doing that and making a living off of it and all this stuff," and it's kind of sad when you have to bring them down and say, I can buy lunch with what I make off my books a week, but the important thing is the perception you have out there, not only your reputation as a good person within the community, the online community and your regular community, but also with the media as well. If you look like a big deal and you act like a big deal with the media, you're going to get more attention that way than if you. And you're gonna find that doors will open the more you put yourself out there for these different opportunities. And it kind of just goes back to generally in your career starting out, just saying yes to the opportunities that come up until you get to the point where you're established enough that you kind of have to pick and choose between those.
All right. And on the subject of opportunities, those, the book tours and personal appearances and stuff are stuff that's more available to traditional and successful authors. Do you think that indies and smaller authors have opportunities that the bigger authors don't?
I think one thing that indie authors can take advantage of are just the smaller niche groups that oftentimes the bestsellers overlook. If you're talking about Stephen King, he's got probably millions of fans, hundreds of thousands of fans out there. But there's also, and when you look at the publicity that their agents are doing for them, a lot of times they're glossing over kind of the smaller groups of super fans that are out there. Like, Stephen King's not going to go talk to a group of 20 people that gather together every Wednesday at a local library or something. So, and really, it's kind of backtracking on what I said, but quality is important is as important as quantity. So, if you have 20 super fans, that's better than 50 people who will never read your stuff that are signed up for your mailing list. So I would say when it comes to media, quantity is always great, but when it comes to actual readers and doing stuff that engages with readers, whether it's online or it's doing book tours and stuff like that, I think quality matters just as much as quantity does. So you shouldn't overlook those opportunities that come up when you can speak to 5 people, or one thing I like to do is send out rewards in the mail, which is like a book cover on a postcard to some of my fans. Just stuff that you can do to make individual people think, "Oh yeah, this guy cares that I read his stuff."
All right. Yeah, you do have a lot more direct interaction with your fans when you're in India. That's for certain. All right, well, that completes the questions I had, so now I'll pass you off to Lindsay for the last few questions.
All right, well, we'll give Derek a chance to drink there. Got to keep him hydrated. But I was just kind of wondering, because I think a lot of times when authors do think of hiring PR firms, and I actually get emailed that quite often, is like, yeah, or who can I just hire to do this all for me, if you have anybody you'd recommend. And then I'm like, well, I've actually not come across anybody yet who hasn't said it was really expensive and didn't turn them into a bestseller. But I think where people get daunted is sort of the online stuff and social media, if they're not really those kind of people that are already in that. So I guess, do you have any suggestions for authors who are maybe a little afraid of, it's probably not going to be many of our audience since they're listening to podcasts, but how can people take them, just jump in gradually and not be too afraid of the online and social media stuff?
Kind of the best comparison I have for this is 5 years ago when social media came into the business sphere, and when social media came into public relations and marketing, everyone thought, oh, I have to have a Facebook page, I have to be on Twitter, I have to be everywhere. But no one really thought about why am I doing this? And so I think when it comes to public relations, hiring a publicist or an entire agency, I think you need to think, why am I doing this? How much is this going to cost me? And what can I do myself? And what doors are they opening for me, like what we talked about earlier? What opportunities are they opening for me that I can't make on my own? Kind of the strength with an individual public relations agent or with an agency, it really comes down to the connections they have. Like what we've talked about before, anyone can make a list of bloggers to contact. Anyone can send an email to their local newspaper. The difference is with the good PR agents and the good agencies are the reputations and the relationships they already have built up. So when they email your local news station and say, hey, I've got a new author, we want to get him on air, or when they shoot over a phone call or an email to your local paper to a beat writer and say, hey, here's something you haven't thought about covering. The difference there is a situation where maybe you, as kind of Joe Nobody out there starting out, they're just going to pass that email over, but when they hear it coming from an agent, they say, okay, yeah, we're interested. And another skill with that is, and this is something you can learn yourself, is just trying to figure out how to best market and advertise yourself. How do you put a spin on things that makes it so you have a story that's worth telling to other people? I'm a firm believer in that everybody has a story that will be of some interest to another group of people. It just comes down to the way you present that and the way you kind of showcase yourself, which, sometimes as authors, that's a hard thing for us to do. A lot of authors are introverts, and sometimes that's what it really comes down to, is just being able to put yourself out there and say, hey, I did this, and here's this body of work that I created, and I'm proud of it, and it's not something that everybody does. I kind of rambled there, but back to your original question, if you wanted to kind of test the waters, I would suggest the first thing you could look at doing is maybe hiring an intern for, a monthly stipend, someone that's a senior in a PR or communications program in college looking for some experience. And from there, it can kind of go up. There's a lot of people that are just graduated from college that are looking for work. There's a lot of freelance PR people out there. And like myself, there's a lot of small agencies where the total size of our firm, there's only 4 people in it. So we take on a lot of different projects. We have some small stuff. We have some bigger stuff. I think the thing that I would say that authors should watch out for if they're just testing the waters with this are the bigger firms, because when you're getting into the agencies that have 20, 30, 40, 50 plus people, they'll take your money every month, but you're going to be a small fish in a very big pond. And when they've got bigger accounts to work on, in some instances, you might get passed over. You might not get the attention that you could, or the amount of detail and, I guess, love you are paying for that you could get with a smaller agency or with an individual person that's trying to build up their portfolio.
All right, great information. And usually what I tell people that email me is like, is this your one book? Is this your memoir and you're done after that? And do you have money to spend? Because I think in that case, maybe it is just, whatever, spend the $5,000 or whatever and have someone else take care of it. But if you're thinking, I'm going to build a career, I'm going to write 2-3 books a year, I want to have all these series, I feel like you just got to learn to do this stuff yourself. Eventually you can get an assistant, but you're going to have to train that assistant. So I just say, suck it up and, start with Facebook. I hate Facebook. A lot of people do, but even the baby boomers are on Facebook. Like my dad is usually the first one to like my posts when he's supposed to be at his work day or whatever. But so I think if you just start with 1 or 2 of the big sites, then maybe it won't be quite so daunting. But that's just my take on that. Last question for you is, are there anything you see people doing on the web or on social media that's a mistake and that maybe a waste of time they probably shouldn't be bothering with?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and probably the obvious answer, is stuff that everybody in the community already talks about. It's the people that go out and say, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. And, it's okay once in a while to tell people to buy your book. I mean, if you're serious about this, it is a business and you do need to sell books. But what you need to do is be genuine and balance that out with thoughtful posts and different things like that. Also sharing the love with other authors and different people. And like I said, this probably isn't the snazzy answer or anything like that, but really I think people that just go out there and try to broadcast themselves saying, buy my book all the time and talking about their book all the time, even if it's not saying buy it, just talking about it all the time. I think there needs to be a balance there, and you need to be careful about how much you're just throwing yourself at people compared to how much you're kind of spreading the love with the people that you follow on social media, for instance. I think another thing to remember too is just that everything on the web lasts forever. So, you could say something bad in public. It might go around the community, but eventually that's going to die down and die out. With the web, there's going to be a trace of that up forever. I know there was just a case a couple weeks ago where an author had kind of went off on a tangent against a Goodreads reviewer who left a bad review, and that's something that I know a ton of people heard about. And not only does everyone know, okay, this guy, he can't take criticism for his work, which means reviewers aren't going to want to touch that. They're like, hey, if you're going to threaten me, I don't want to read your book. But I think also just other authors go, well, that's not someone I want to swap guest posts with. That's not someone I want to do a bundle with or anything like that. So I think it's important to pay attention to your reputation, and basically what that boils down to is try to act as if you were already a bestseller, even if you're just starting out, and think, okay, would I do this if I had 1,000 fans or 10,000 fans or 100,000 fans? And try to remember that whatever you say, it's going to come back around and bite you eventually.
All right, sounds like some good information there and good advice. I think a lot of people just, like with the reviews and things, they're just so hurt and they take it so personally and they react without, if take a day off before you write something you're going to regret, because you think the web is nothing but ones and zeros, digital bits. But you're right, you can go onto those archive sites and find stuff from like 1997. So be careful out there. All right, but thanks a lot for being our guest. And kind of in closing, could you tell people where to find you and if which book maybe they should check out first?
So for the people that are interested in checking out my medieval western take on epic fantasy, you can go to derekallensiddoway.com. Be sure to sign up for my newsletter there because it's super awesome. And for all the authors out there that are looking for just general marketing, PR advice, and kind of sharing their story, you should go to everydayauthor.com. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences.
All right, and I will put the links in the show notes so people can come by the site, sffmarketing.com.
Hey,
and,
you remembered it.
I just can't pronounce it. For some reason, those two F's really throw me. But okay, we didn't ask you, Derek, but one last question since you mentioned it. Is your newsletter actually awesome, and is there anything special you're doing, or were you just teasing us?
No, so one thing I'm doing, I kind of treat my newsletter like a Kickstarter, and what I mean by that is basically that I have subscriber perks set at every level, so whenever I get to, X amount of subscribers, I give everybody on the list something new. And then also on top of that, I also try to treat those guys right because they're awesome. They get sneak peek previews, behind-the-scenes stuff that no one else gets. Usually I have some early release stuff that I send out to them, so I try to make it as cool and awesome as possible to live up to the hype I've created around it.
All right, that's pretty cool. That's something I haven't heard before. I like the idea of subscriber perks because maybe it will kind of entice them to get other people to sign up if there's something they want.
That is a good idea.
All right, you'll find it in the show notes, guys. Subscriber perks. All right, Derek, thanks a lot for coming on, and we really appreciated having you as a guest.
Thanks for having me. It was a great time, guys.
Yep. Thanks for the info. We appreciate it.
All right. So long.
Bye.